Hello everybody, so if you remember in part one, this was one of those things where I just recorded it in one big session and then I've cut it down kind of after the fact, like split it at an arbitrary point. And of course, having split it at an arbitrary point, it's, I would say, much more important that you actually go back and watch part one if you haven't already, because otherwise we're just going to be starting off, straight into just, yeah, like I say, kind of probably a random point. I'll try and make it a point which somewhat makes sense, but I don't know how good of a job I'll do at doing that because I haven't actually edited it yet. So you should just watch part one and just view this as one continuous thing. So with that said, I don't want to interrupt the continuity too much, so I'll just jump into part two right now. Enjoy.
Yeah, believe people about their preferences in ice cream or partners and on their gender because nobody knows themselves better than themselves.
Well, I don't think that's true. No, I think a lot of the time people can know other people better than themselves, but it's also worth noting that, again, people don't just describe themselves with reference to themselves, though. They describe themselves with reference to categories that exist in objective reality, or objective reality. Categories that exist. So, sure, somebody might know their own beliefs about God better than anybody else, but that doesn't... If they then describe their beliefs about God as Christian, when in fact they don't even believe God exists, and they say, no, I'm not an atheist, I'm a Christian, when they don't believe God exists, then sure, they're describing their own beliefs accurately, but they're not describing their beliefs accurately in relation to this other claim. And, that applies to everything. Yeah, if somebody says, well, I have sex with guys every single day, just banging guys all the time, and I'm a guy. I'm just banging guys, every single type of guy, all sorts of different body shapes, everything else. I just can't get enough of guys. But I'm not gay. Well, in that case, okay, they're describing themselves accurately, or they know themselves accurately. They know that they're having sex with other guys. They know things about themselves, but they're being inaccurate in relation to this categorization of gay or indeed bisexual. It's pretty clear that if they're having sex with guys every single day, they're having sex with all sorts of different guys, then they must either be, and they're a man, they must either be bisexual or gay. They are describing themselves, again, incorrectly, not in relation to themselves exactly, but they're in relation to this category that has a particular definition, this word which has a definition. And of course, you can apply that to other stuff. Religion, politics. There are plenty of people who will call themselves socialists and they're not socialists. People, yeah. And I'm not doubting that they know themselves well. I'm doubting that they actually know what it means to actually be a socialist.
Gender is assigned. Okay, this is a nitpick, but there are two S's in assigned. But yeah, if a baby is born with male genitalia, do you not refer to that baby as he? When a baby is born, a gender is assigned based on external sex characteristics, and the child is raised with that gender.
Alright, so, real quick. The term gender is used all sorts of different ways, so it's a bit pointless. But, assuming gender means whether you're a man or woman, well, then in that case, I would say it's not assigned, it's observed. You're observed to be a biological male or biological female, and if you're a biological male, then you're a man. If you're a biological female, you're a woman. I think it's kind of a pointless thing, because of course you could say, well, it's observed and then it's assigned. So I guess it's technically not wrong to say it's assigned, but yeah, whatever. Just wanted to stress kind of my position on it.
If you have a form and it asks you for your gender and you answer, that's self-ID. Gender criticals and other transphobes often...
Yeah, again, so this is what it really means is self-ID trumping all actual reality. So again, and if you want to make an example, and it's just a really obvious example, but yeah, if you say, well, if somebody self-IDs as a Christian, then it's irrelevant that they believe there is no God but God and Muhammad is his prophet. Well, look, I'm sorry, but you can identify as a Christian if you want, but when that comes up against the reality that you clearly hold to Muslim theological beliefs, you're not a Christian, you're a Muslim. And, again, there's just so many examples I could pick from there. Ultimately, again, it's not so much that you can't self-identify, it's that your self-identity can't trump reality.
Often say that they're opposed to self-ID, but rarely present an alternative. Do you really want to pull your pants down and show a stranger your genitals every time a form asks you for your sex or gender?
This is an epistemological point rather than an ontological point. And again, also, so yeah, the point is not so much can you know that when somebody's describing self-identity they're being accurate. The question is is self-identity in and of itself what makes a claim accurate? That's the distinction here. My position is that self-identity is accurate because it's describing reality. Your position is that self-identity is reality because you're describing it, if you get what I'm saying. And those are two different positions ontologically. So yeah, sure, there's not a neat epistemological solution to this, I don't think, but that's not really the point.
It's not trans people who want to reinforce those stereotypes. It's transphobic and usually sexist cis people who are forcing trans people to follow those stereotypes.
Well, look, I mean, at the end of the day, it's pretty obvious that there are some trans-identified people who are happy to just look however they like. But a lot of trans-identified people very clearly do just want to look loads like a woman or loads like a man, and it's very clear they relate themselves being a woman or being a man to that they look so much like a stereotypical woman or stereotypical man. So with that said, it's pretty clear there is an undeniable thread in this ideology which says, hey, look like a stereotypical female, look like a stereotypical male. That's how you validate your trans identity.
Anyone of any gender, cis or trans, can be hairy or shaved. Also, anyone who thinks skirts are exclusively female has clearly never heard of the kilt. I'm not...
So yeah, basically, I mean, that was the point about like people who are gender non-conforming being expected to kind of trans themselves to be gender conforming. And the thing is, okay, you can say that, but the issue is there are literally examples of young children who have been identified as trans based on the fact that they liked wearing pink dresses and they liked ballet if they were a biological male. This is a thing that has happened. So again, does it describe every single trans-identified person? No, I don't think so. Is it an actual problem that exists in this ideology? Yes, it is.
The infographic says trans people need hormones and surgery to change their bodies, but with self-ID, one doesn't need to change their body because their identity is based on feelings?
Okay, I don't know why this is supposed to be an incorrect statement, so let's see.
I think it's necessary to point out at this moment that trans people are real and they aren't shitting you with how they feel.
No one thinks they are.
They literally cannot decide between wanting to pressure trans people into transition or else be seen as an active threat to everyone else, or if they should be dissuaded from getting surgery for their own good.
What? What are those two positions?
Cannot decide between wanting to pressure trans people into transition or else...
Who wants to pressure trans people into transitioning? No one. No one wants to do that. What do you mean they can't say, I don't know a single gender critical person who wants to pressure trans people to transition? What do you want about?
Else be seen as an active threat to everyone else, or if they should be dissuaded from getting surgery for their own good.
Yeah. The mainstream gender critical position is that trans people or trans identified people should be persuaded that, hey, you don't need to do all of this surgery to kind of, be your true self or anything like that. Just be who you are. Don't do all of this unnecessary invasive surgery. There's no contradiction here. Right, so my camera was running out of battery, so I decided to treat myself to a little cycle ride. And while I was out, I kind of was trying to think about what was meant there. And I think maybe what it's kind of getting at is the fact that something I've said before is that there are ways of understanding trans identity in a way that kind of makes sense. What I mean by makes sense is I mean has a material referent. And one of those things would be saying, well, if one of those things, for example, would be transmedicalism. Transmedicalism, there's a material referent there. It's saying, well, what makes you a woman is this particular surgery. It's a surgery that causes you to become a woman. There's also, of course, you could say, if somebody puts on, basically, if somebody's feminine, they're a woman, or if somebody's masculine, they're a woman. These ways of understanding trans identity, at least it's clear what the referent is. And this is in contrast to, for example, the self-identity understanding of trans identity, where it's not even clear what the referent is, or rather, it simply just becomes completely circular. It's like, well, I am trans because I identify as trans, and I identify as trans because I'm trans. There's no meaning there. It's like, well, what do you mean? Whereas if somebody says, I'm trans because I had this particular surgery, at least I know what they're saying. Now, obviously, maybe, therefore, what this is kind of pointing out is, by that logic, you could say that I am presenting surgery as a kind of a positive thing, in that I'm saying, well, at least if somebody has surgery, I can understand the idea of claiming to be trans. But the point is, and this is the key thing, being coherent isn't the only thing that matters. The other thing is, of course, being moral. And I think, and also, I mean, there's also whether or not it's correct. Like, something can be coherent but not correct. But certainly, yeah, I think saying that there is a particular surgery somebody has to have in order to be a woman, I think there are some moral issues of that. So basically, yeah, I was kind of thinking about, I was like, okay, maybe that's what it means. Like, basically, it's thinking that because most gender critical people, I imagine, would agree with me, that at least you can understand what somebody means when they say that surgery causes them to become a woman or causes them to become a man, that they're kind of interpreting that as a positive and therefore thinking, well, this must mean that gender critical people think surgery can be a good thing sometimes. Whereas obviously, and I can kind of understand that, because one of the main criticisms of trans identity is that it's incoherent. There's no clear referent. So if somebody then says, well, there would be a clear referent if you had surgery, they think that's saying, oh, so that must be what they want. But no, of course, that's not true. It's just pointing out how incoherent self-identity is. It's so incoherent that even all of these other things, which are still wrong, you know, you're not a woman just because you have surgery, you're not a woman because you act feminine, or whatever else, they're still wrong, but at least they're coherent. The other thing I was kind of thinking about is in ContraPoints' Turf's video, I remember there's a bit where Contra, playing the character of Abigail Cockbane, says, like, 1 minute you're saying that, you know, people who fulfill a certain role are women, and the next minute you're saying that not every trans person transitions, and like, women with short hair are a third sex or whatever, you know, things like that. And basically, within that context, obviously, you could say, well, is that implying that medically transitioning is a good thing? Well, no, it's not. It's just saying that medically transitioning at least makes some sense. So yeah, in summary, if you say, like, I could just be a woman because I say I'm a woman, that makes no sense at all. If you say I could be a woman if I acted stereotypically feminine, got surgery to seem more like a female, or whatever else, then that's still wrong, but at least it kind of, like, at least I can sort of understand where you're coming from. But that doesn't mean getting surgery is a good thing. Sure, if you get surgery, I would kind of understand a little bit more why it is you think you're a woman, like, you know, compared to, for example, if you just look like me and you think you're a woman, that would make no sense to me at all. But that's not me saying you should get surgery. It's just me saying, well, it would make slightly more sense in that case. But making slightly more sense should not be the goal. The goal should be holding to correct beliefs. So yeah, that's my attempt to understand what that point was trying to be. Hopefully I don't know, contributed something by saying all of that.
Now, to address the claim that inclusive language erases women. People with a womb, people who menstruate, and people with a cervix are not synonymous with women. First of all, trans men and some non-binary people have this anatomy, and some menstruate, but...
Well, obviously, gender-critical people don't believe that, like, you're using the kind of terminology and logic of gender ideology to defend gender ideology, which is ridiculous.
Second, these terms don't even include all cis women. By this logic, a cis woman who has had a hysterectomy is no longer a woman, and a cis...
Well, okay, yeah, so the point here is that that's not true, basically. Like, to say that women have wombs or women menstruate does not mean every single woman needs to have a womb or every single woman needs to menstruate. It's simply pointing out that using language that could be replaced with women, like if you said woman, like if you said women need to have access to birth control, or for example, you said birth control pill for women, everyone knows what you mean by that. And it's not, you're not like, well, why would a woman who had a hysterectomy need birth control pills? It's just ridiculous. And, you know, I mean, it's kind of a similar thing. For example, like I could use language to describe, let's see, things that are typical of a black person, like physical features that are typical of a black person. And it would be weird for me to describe those features and not just say black people, even though, like, I mean, let's say, for example, a really obvious example would be a lot of kind of pro-black movements are big fans of the afro. You know, they're kind of like saying, hey, you know, don't make your hair, like, don't conform your hair to white European beauty standards by straightening it and all that kind of stuff. Grow it like an afro. That's an example of that language. And the thing is, there's a dramatic difference, though, between saying, like, we need to go out and kind of normalize the beautiful hair of Afro people, people with afros, versus saying we need to go out and normalize the hair of black people's hair, like show how that's beautiful and black is beautiful and all that. Yeah, that's the thing. There would be a big difference between somebody saying dark skin pigmentation people are beautiful, melanin people are beautiful, Afro people are beautiful. It's actually better to just say black people are beautiful, black is beautiful. And it doesn't matter in that case that not all black people are going to have afros, not all black people are going to have equivalent degrees of skin pigmentation. And it also doesn't matter that there's going to be plenty of non-black people who might also have afros. I know there are other races apart from black people that have afros. But the point is, it would still be weird for a black liberation movement to talk about Afro people or whatever else, and in the exact same sense, notwithstanding the fact that not all women menstruate or whatever else, it would still be weird for a women's liberation movement to talk about menstruating people rather than women. So there we go. That's the basic, I think, issue of this kind of language that raises women.
Next, let's address women's spaces, competition, and jobs, and men's spaces, competitions, and jobs. If you think there's a such thing as men's and women's jobs, you're an old-fashioned sexist.
There are men's and women's jobs, because there are jobs done by men and jobs done by women. Like, my assumption here, and I might be wrong, my assumption here, based on the fact it's mentioning competitions, is it's saying that it's a little bit weird. Like, I don't really know exactly what this is saying, to be honest. Like, it's a bit confusing. My assumption, and I could be wrong here, is that this is saying that trans identity is bad because it erases women's spaces, women's competitions, and women's jobs. And the point being, for example, if let's work backwards through that, a woman's job might be an example of kind of, I don't know if affirmative action's like the right term, but when, for example, you say, we want, for example, the Green Party, they have a rule which says that if their leader is a male, their deputy leader, or if their leader's a man, their deputy leader has to be a woman. If their deputy leader's a woman, if their leader's a woman, their deputy leader has to be a man. Now, the thing is, so that's an example of where there is a woman's job and a man's job. And basically, one job has to be occupied by a woman, one job has to be occupied by a man. But if trans identity is a thing, then I could just identify as a woman, and suddenly that job could be fulfilled by me and a man. And many women might feel that that's not actually fulfilling what the point of having a woman's job there is supposed to be. The woman's job thing is saying, yeah, that there should be one of those jobs needs to be reserved for women. And basically that's the point. It's talking about jobs reserved for women. Now, of course, when, and I can just go backwards, when you're talking about competitions, what are you talking about? You're talking about competitions reserved for women. There are going to be, women will have, because of simply the reality of their biology, differences in terms of their capacity. But you don't even have to talk about that. For example, there are also kind of things where you could say women don't necessarily have a disadvantage, but it's still a specific thing for women. And one of the reasons for that is because women have been historically disadvantaged, and therefore it's quite normal to have spaces reserved for women. And of course, in America, for example, where black people have been historically disadvantaged, this is why they'll often have specific competitions and things reserved for black people. And the reason they do that is because black people have been disadvantaged historically, and therefore if black people might end up being underrepresented unless you had these specific things reserved for black people. Women similarly have been historically disadvantaged, indeed more reliably and consistently so than black people throughout history. But women have been kind of disadvantaged all over the world, and therefore you might want to reserve certain competitions for women. Otherwise women would end up being underrepresented. And of course, again, that logic completely falls through if just anybody can identify as a woman. And finally, women's spaces, I don't really need to repeat that. That's what I think this is saying, but I'll see. So I think nobody's saying there are specific jobs for, there are specific jobs for women and specific jobs for men, because there are some jobs which are reserved for women because of, as a way to kind of achieve equality of outcome. Lots of corporations, I think it's, if a corporation has a job reserved for women, that's a good thing, right? Like if a corporation says 50% of our, I know it's a pretty neoliberal thing, but, whatever. 50% of our upper administration, whatever, the positions need to be filled by women. Those are jobs reserved for women. That's a good thing. So yeah, it's not stereotypical old-fashioned sexism. Now I know what this person seems to think it means is the idea that like there are certain types of jobs that women should be doing rather than men. And of course that's nonsense, but I don't think that's what this is saying, but let's see.
The infographic also claims that trans allies are redefining sexual orientation.
Okay, so there wasn't even any attempt to elaborate on that, which is interesting. So there was just that complete misrepresentation, and then that was it.
Labels, so let's give some definitions. People who are attracted primarily or exclusively to the opposite binary sex or gender can describe themselves as heterosexual. People who are attracted primarily or exclusively to the same binary sex or gender can describe themselves as gay or lesbian.
I just want to say up front, yeah, like I said, I don't really care about all the specifics of like this sexuality thing. I just want to point out that, again, it would be ridiculous. Like, here's the issue, okay? In fact, wait, let me just get to the bisexual thing.
People who are attracted to more than one sex or gender can describe themselves as bisexual.
Okay, here's the thing, okay? See, what I was going to point out is that it would be ridiculous to say that my fiance could identify as a man and that would make me gay. Like, that would be ridiculous. Surely we can all agree on that. Like, and I mean, like, my fiance doesn't change anything about how she looks. She just identifies as a man and suddenly I'm gay. That's ridiculous. Now, the thing is, what they kind of, CritFacts was able to do there is be like, well, you can identify as bisexual. And it's like, okay, well, at least that's not quite as ridiculous because it's not saying, but first of all, I would argue, is that really how definitions work? Like, ultimately, again, if you are a biological male attracted to other biological males, if you're going out and just banging biological males all over the place, and, you know, again, you know, looking all sorts of different ways, all sorts of different body types, all that kind of stuff. I don't think it's just that you can identify as gay. It's that you are gay. There's no like, you can identify that way if you want to. No, you are gay. And that, yeah, that's what I just thought. It was kind of like, it feels like one of those things, like a kind of like a meme thing, just to have me go like, you are gay into the camera. But yeah, like that's the thing. It's just, you are gay. There's no you can about it. So I don't think that's really how definitions work. Like if you are fulfilling the conditions of a particular definition, then you are the thing that definition is describing. That's all there is to it. So I think it's kind of a cop-out to be like, you can define yourself as gay. No, if you're going out and doing all that with a bunch of guys, you're gay, as long as you're a guy. So again, but the other issue is, so based on that logic, I think really it shouldn't be you can define yourself as gay or bisexual. It should be you are bisexual, in which case you would have to conclude that if my fiance identified as a man, I would just become bisexual. Like I didn't have any say in the matter. I just am bisexual now. But the thing is, okay, let's be generous. Okay, let's say, okay, we're granting this logic that it's not you are bisexual, it's just you can say you're bisexual. Does that really make any sense at all? Indeed, actually, can I just point this out? I could say I'm bisexual, right? Like, easily. Because, you know, there are trans men, or trans-identified females, aka, who I think are decently attractive. Like, I'm certainly way more attracted to them than I would be to men. And again, you know, I'm not going to, like, name people. That would be, and, you know, obviously, usually I'm not, like, kind of thinking, oh, how attractive do I find this person? But, you know, I think insofar as I have some concept whenever I'm talking about anybody or looking at anybody, some concept of how attractive they are, there definitely are trans-identified females who I find attractive. So based on that logic, I guess I could just say I'm bisexual, but then so could anybody, right? So the point is, these terms kind of just cease to really mean anything. Like, anybody can define themselves as bisexual. And indeed, actually, the thing is, if I can, according to this logic, ignore instances where I'm attracted to people who identify as men, could I not, by that same logic, ignore instances where I'm attracted to people who are women? In which case, couldn't I claim to be asexual? Because if I'm attracted to some people who identify as men, and I am, but I can just ignore that and be like, well, okay, I'm still straight because I say so, well, then could I not also ignore the fact that I'm attracted to lots of people who identify as women? In which case I could say I'm asexual. You'll notice, like, that's the thing, none of these things mean anything now. Or indeed, I could ignore all the instances I'm attracted to women and only identify according to the instances where I'm attracted to men and say that I'm gay, which is ridiculous. But, again, and I'm not going to name specific trans-identified females here, but yeah, if I could just say, well, I'm attracted to that trans-identified female who identifies as a man, therefore I'm attracted to somebody who identifies as a man, and I'm just going to, ignore the fact that I'm attracted to lots of people who identify as women, and I'm just going to say I'm gay. And that would be kind of ridiculous. So again, you can literally identify anyway, and of course I could identify as lesbian. So I could literally, by this logic, I could identify as asexual, bisexual, gay, or lesbian, and not change a single aspect of my behavior, or actually change a single aspect of who I'm actually attracted to. The only thing I would have to do is change the focus of who I'm attracted to with reference to my own identity, right? Like if I choose not to pay attention to the fact that I'm attracted to anyone and just say, well, I choose to identify as asexual, I can identify as asexual. Oh, and actually, of course, I can say I'm heterosexual too. And all of that just extends naturally from being consistent with the definitions that were laid out by CritFacts there.
As for bi being rebranded as queer, this is simply false. Bi is bi. Queer in the context of sexuality is an umbrella term for any sexuality that isn't heterosexual.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I mean, I'm not sure about that. I don't really know enough about it, so I'm just gonna, I know I've got I've got a lot of lesbian, some gay, and I would assume some bisexual fans. If you know more about this kind of bi equals queer thing, you can kind of drop it in the comments below. I don't really know much about it. I can imagine one term's being replaced with the other, but it's, just something I don't really know much about.
The infographic claims that sexuality should be defined by chromosomes. Think of someone you find attractive. Do you know their karyotype? Probably not.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, focusing on karyotype is bad. Of course, you should focus on phenotype. But again, I will stress, I have said already that I do think sexual orientation is complicated. I said that, and I stand by it. So yeah, all this stuff that's going to be talking about chromosomes, it doesn't respond to me because I've never been of the position that it's totally simple. So again, I assume this kind of karyotype thing is going to be focused on for a little bit, and it's going to point out that obviously X, Y, and XX aren't even just there are actually chromosomal configurations beyond that. But yeah, for me, like I say, I don't think sexuality is super simplistic. I think people who do just saying, well, it's just if you're XX and XY, that's heterosexual, and that's all there is to it. I think that's a bit simplistic. So yeah, that's me.
In the bottom right corner of the infographic, you will find the pages rolled up to reveal AGP, autogynephilia, fetish, money, big pharma, patriarchy, pedophilia, misogyny, porn, homophobia, and body dysmorphic disorder. This is just a weird mix of conspiracy theories, transphobia, and homophobia.
I feel like I should probably say something in response to this, and I'll just say, well, look, I mean, all this is saying is that people who, and to me, I mean, something I put on there just generally is kind of capitalism, neoliberal capitalism. But yeah, no, I do think there are, the thing is, conspiracy theory, it's always one of those weird words because it's kind of I did see this thing recently from one of the kind of communist subreddits that I frequent, where it was a kind of right-wing conspiracies. There's stem cells in the water that are turning everybody gay. And then it's left-wing conspiracy. The government literally admitted to torturing people in South Vietnam or whatever. That's the thing, most Marxist conspiracy theories, they aren't even really conspiracy theories. They're just matters of public record that most people just still don't even know about anyway. It's not that's the thing, it's almost not really a conspiracy. There really aren't any Marxist conspiracy theories because it's these things that these people are doing, they're admitting to it. They're basically just admitting. I mean, there are certainly some conspiracy theories JFK being assassinated due to kind of his relationship, things to do with Cuba. I've seen the film, the Oliver Stone film, and it's not something I'm an expert on. But having seen I'm inclined to believe that there's something iffy going on there. So there probably are things where I would say it's actually conspiracy theories, if you like, that I believe, which basically amount to that the elite of this country, of the world, which is to say the capitalist class, are involved in all sorts of dodgy shenanigans to oppress the masses. But the majority of things I believe that people would call conspiracy theories aren't even conspiracy theories. They're things where, like I say, it's a matter of public record. I bet there are people who, the idea of, not JFK, Ronald Reagan selling weapons to Iran so he can funnel money to Nicaraguan drug dealers so that they can fight the communist government there. That might sound like a conspiracy theory, but it's literally just a matter of public record. Like, we know it happened. And, again, so with that said, I mean, that was just to say, I think the whole conspiracy theory thing is kind of silly. And with all of that said, yeah, I do think there are nefarious forces, principally relating to, like I say, the capitalist establishment, that are involved in this kind of gender identity stuff. Now, is that something which I think is like front and center of all my analysis? No, I think it's something kind of in the background, just as in reality it's something in the background. But yeah, it's definitely something I do believe. Do I agree with every single one of these things? Well, again, I kind of agree with CritFacts. It's just a random statement of different things. Like, I mean, there is no, like a lot of this stuff isn't institutionalized. I do find it funny though that it mentions homophobia, but then like CritFacts accuses this list of being homophobic. It's like, but it's mentioning I don't know, whatever. Anyway.
Gynephilia has been thoroughly discredited and was used by Ray Blanchard to cast out that Blanchard has been mostly rejected by the medical community. As for fetish, what you do in your bedroom with consenting adults...
I'm pretty sure, by the way, just the record, that it's AGP fetish as like one word, because AGP is a fetish. So I'd assume rather than being AGP and fetish as two separate things, it's AGP fetish. I will say, there was a mention of AGP. I've said before, the fact that anybody would deny like AGP is just bizarre to me, because it's like, look, sissy hypno porn exists. We know, like I've said this before, and I'll keep saying it every single time it's brought up. We know that there are men, biological males, who get off on the idea of being women. And we also know that there are biological males who say they are women. It seems absolutely ridiculous to me to suggest that these two things we both know are true don't relate to each other in any way. That is absurd, and I just can't believe that. And again, I when people deny AGP, I think, are they denying like that sissy hypno porn is a thing? Are they denying that there are biological males who get off on the idea of being women? Or are they claiming that despite the fact this group of people exist, they have absolutely nothing to do with this group of biological males who claim to be women? And again, if you're going to deny that, that seems on a surface level bizarre. It's like, again, if you have a group of people who all show this enthusiastic interest in doing something, and then you have a group of people doing that thing, it would seem reasonable to imagine there's some overlap there. I don't know. Whatever.
Money ties into the big pharma conspiracy theories, but also that the trans rights movement is supposedly being funded by people with malevolent motives.
It also could be mentioning John money when you think about it, which is very relevant.
These conspiracy theories often cross the line into overt anti-Semitism. Jewish philanthropists are the most frequent targets.
They say overt anti-Semitism. The issue is that overt anti-Semitism would be literally like, well, it would be explicit. Like overt means explicit, right? So just somebody mentioning a bunch of Jewish people who are, involved in this, that's not overt anti-Semitism. That is, maybe you could say, implied anti-Semitism. You could be like, oh, well, does that indicate this person could be anti-Semitic? Sure. But it's not overt anti-Semitism. Overt anti-Semitism would be somebody saying, like, Jewish people are doing trans stuff because they want to just, for whatever reason. Somebody would have to be, like, making a claim about Jewish people in general in a negative way, and that would be overt anti-Semitism. I'm not really aware of anybody having done that.
If you believe in men's jobs and women's jobs, which the creator of the infographic does, you are the patriarchy.
Again, a misunderstanding. I mean, it's kind of funny that I started this video off talking about CritFacts not understanding stuff. I was going to say 100% sure. I'm like 99% sure that that's not saying that there are specific jobs for men and women. Rather, again, because the issue is if you're saying that they believe in specific men's jobs and women's jobs, you have to believe they believe in specific women's competitions, which is, again, that doesn't really make any sense. So, no, look, it is, and let me be clear, I guess, so we've gone through them. So far, I said, I think, I've given my opinion on AGP. The John Money stuff, or, again, well, I've already said about capitalism, and yes, definitely capitalism, but also, if it's talking about John Money, yes, definitely John Money. He's also behind it. Big Pharma, yes, I think that it would make sense that they'd be involved in that. They have every reason to want to, you know, keep an industry alive. Patriarchy, yes, definitely. I'm probably not going to go through all of this, but yeah.
Equating trans people to pedophiles is a particularly bad level of yikes. And as usual, when it comes to transphobes, it's reheated homophobia, since it's no longer considered acceptable.
I mean, look, I'll say this, okay? So, that particular accusation, the only thing I could think about is it's kind of like the idea of the more that you can make kind of LGB activism, let's say, about more than just LGB, the more you can add stuff to it. Like, I guess that's the argument. So it's kind of like, well, yes, of course, people who want to add the P to LGB are also going to support adding all the other stuff as well, because it's like the more stuff you add. So I think there's an argument that I would imagine that a proportionally quite high number of people who advocate for that particular thing would also support adding, support the validity of trans identity. And I suppose I should point out the obvious point, actually, which is that this isn't saying that all trans-identified people are pedophiles, or even that the majority are, or even that any are. It's just pointing out, again, for example, not every trans-identified person is in big pharma either. This isn't saying that, like, pointing to the people behind trans identity and the trans identity movement is not the same thing as arguing every single person who is trans-identified is, one of those things.
Misogyny and homophobia are bad, obviously, but it's the GCs who are sexist and homophobic.
Nope.
I've already explained the vile sexism in this infographic, and the idea that trans people transition because they don't want to be gay is ridiculous and false. The vast majority of trans people are not straight.
The vast majority of trans people are not straight. Okay, again, I want to point this out again. I need to point this out every single time. Saying that something might be behind something is not the same thing as saying every single person is that thing, right? Like, this is not that difficult to understand. Okay, let's point this out. I also believe that homophobes have a reason to want to add the T and the Q to LGB because it makes the LGB position less defensible. I think that support for to LGBs has gone down recently because they've been lumped in with LGBTQs, or rather lumped in with the TQs. So I think that actually, think about it. I think Republicans in America are loving the fact that the T has been added to LGBT. Because look, if lesbians, gays, and bisexuals were just doing their own thing, doing their own activism, they would have been fine. The issue is now that they've been attached to the people who want to, like, trans kids and all that kind of stuff. Now they've been attached to these completely unreasonable people. It's made it much harder to say that the LGB position is reasonable. So I would imagine that people who are opposed to same-sex attracted individuals are loving the trans movement because the trans movement has been very destructive to the acceptance of lesbians, gays, and bisexuals.
The creator of the infographic also seems to think that porn is some great evil. Look, if you think porn is bad, you're not a feminist or a progressive.
Why not?
You're just an old-fashioned social conservative.
Why?
The last thing in the corner is body dysmorphic disorder.
I want to say that I didn't even know what this is going to be about again.
Again, the creator of this infographic seems to think it's some sort of evil rather than something that people actually experience. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, to me, this seems like it's not even a conspiracy, right? Surely? I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I'm not sure.
Moving on, love your body as it is displayed in large text.
Yes, good.
And sure, body positivity is good, but that's not what this is about. It's about personal bodily autonomy. If I don't like my natural hair color, I should be able to dye it without being told to love my body the way
So here's the thing, right? Okay. This is like libertarian nonsense, right? Here's the thing. It's worth noting that bodily autonomy is not absolute. And an obvious example of this would be drugs. People advocate against drugs. Even though, of course, you could say, well, everyone should have the choice of what they want to do. Yeah, sure, but you can still advocate against certain actions. So again, this isn't in itself proving that kind of sex reassignment is a terrible thing and should be opposed. But the point is that it's perfectly legitimate for somebody to assume that position in the exact same way, if they believe that it's a harmful surgery. Like, nobody's saying that you, in the strictest sense, can't choose to perform this particular action. You can choose to do all sorts of things which might be actually quite destructive to you. But what these people are saying is, hey, actually, I think it would be better for you if you just loved your body as it is, if you just accepted yourself. That's it. So it's not these people are denying your bodily autonomy. They're just saying, hey, I actually think this thing would be better for you. Like, use your bodily autonomy to do things that kind of build yourself up rather than like tear yourself down with surgery and all that.
As I said, if you are morally opposed to porn, you're a social conservative, not a feminist.
You haven't explained why yet, though.
But the sentence preceding it is even more shocking because it's literally an endorsement of conversion therapy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why lots of gender-critical people are against the attempt to ban conversion therapy when it relates to gender identity.
Past forms of conversion therapy have included electric shocks to the testicles, just so you have an idea of what I mean.
But they're literally saying that mental health specialists, you're bringing up, that's irrelevant. That's hilariously irrelevant. That's like if somebody said that, people with psychotic delusions need mental health care, and you said, well, past examples of that have involved, cutting people's heads open to let the demons out. It's like, okay, that's irrelevant.
The TLDR...
Oh, actually, you know what I should also say? Past examples of conversion therapy have also included trying to turn biological males into females. Did you know that? That's the thing. You can't ignore the fact that the trans identity movement comes out of the conversion therapy movement. It literally does. And look, I hate telling people this because I like to see them make this mistake, but all of that trans research in 1930s Germany that you guys like to talk about, most of that was actually about trying to find a cure for homosexuality. So, yeah, this is not, and again, that's the thing, most people want to have it both ways. They want to be like, oh, look, the 1930s, Germany, we were attacked. They tore down all our research. But then when somebody points out what that research was, they say, well, that didn't have anything to do with us. Okay, whatever, anyway.
The creator of this particular infographic is a particularly extreme social conservative.
Yep. A weird conclusion considering you haven't evidenced any of that. Apart from just blithely saying, well, if you're against porn, you're a social conservative. That I don't even understand that. I literally have no idea. I can understand saying that, porn can be fine in certain contexts. I can't understand saying, well, just anyone who's ever against porn for any reason is a social conservative. It's ridiculous. Okay, everybody, so that was the end of that video by CritFacts. There wasn't really, we didn't achieve anything particularly dramatic here. Especially seeing as, it's one of those things where when I'm defending somebody else's work, I always feel kind of a bit dispassionate about it. I could at any point just be like, okay, that's what that person said, whatever. Which, obviously is not to say that it's wrong for CritFacts to have done that. It's perfectly fine for CritFacts to have done that. I went into it blind and I kind of thought that it might actually be making some original points more so than just responding to somebody else's points. So overall, I'm just going to wrap up here. My throat kind of hurts, so, I don't know why. Sometimes it just randomly starts hurting. So I'm going to say, if you did enjoy this, then please do comment, share, all that stuff. I don't really need to go through all of it. I'll also say you can check out my other channels because, they're interesting. Oh, you know what I've never mentioned before, and I'll mention it now. I have a channel where I play Civilization 4. Now, the thing is, I do it because I enjoy it. And, the thing is, I edit these videos. And when I'm editing these videos, most of the time I'm just listening. I will actually be, later on, hello there, Michael, listening to myself saying this right now and editing it. If I really wanted to prank me, I could stumble over my words, so I'd have to edit it out. Or say something obscene. But, no, yeah, basically, the point is, while I'm listening, there's no point me watching myself doing all of this. I do things, I'm not just going to sit there in complete, stoic nothingness. So usually what I do is I play Civilization. It's a very easy thing to kind of just play while I'm listening to something else. I can just super easy. And therefore, I kind of thought to myself, well, seeing as I'm doing this anyway, why not just record it? So I did. I started recording it. And therefore, if you are either one, a big fan of Civilization, or two, a big fan of me, and you just think anything that I'm doing, you want to go check it out, then actually, yeah, go check that out, because I think you might find it kind of interesting. Ultimately, I want to stress my goal will never ever be to be a Civilization Let's Play channel, but I enjoy making videos. I enjoy doing things like that. It's actually, yeah, something I would literally do even if like hardly anybody watched it. But seeing as I am doing it, yeah, if somebody wants to go watch it, well, be my guest. But apart from that, yeah, please do give on Patreon if you can. It really does help. It really helps to keep this channel alive. And long term, maybe it could even make this channel become something even grander. So it's really appreciated, even just a small amount. Of course, yeah, I've been at a point now for a while where if every single person watching this gave $1 right now, I would be able to do this full time. It would cost, you $12 a year. And it would, if enough people did it, it would mean I could do this channel full time. So that would be awesome. I don't, obviously I realize there's various reasons people can't really give. But yeah, thank you. And of course, what I really want to say is thank you to my current patrons. In addition to the names scrolling past on your screen right now, I would like to give a special thanks to last month's patrons: Anthony, Diana, June, Space Jack, and Rachel. You're all very appreciated.